Look at this city. To an outside observer, it looks like a powder keg waiting to explode. The currency is collapsing. The price of basic groceries changes not by the year, but by the week. The historic heart of the city is being hollowed out, while a glittering multi-billion-dollar playground of glass and steel rises in the distant desert, completely out of reach for 90% of the people living here. If you read the data on paper, you would ask yourself a simple question. Why aren't these people revolting? History books tell us that when conditions get this bad, people mobilize. They speak up. They organize. The outsider assumes the population must be paralyzed by fear, or perhaps they simply lack the resources to change their fate. But the outsider is wrong. The regime holding power here hasn't built a better prison wall. They've built something far more sophisticated. They have built an invisible ledger, and they are balancing it every single day. This is the outsider's question. It echoes in policy rooms in Washington and London. It fills think tank reports titled The Zeratin Problem, or Why Reform Never Takes Hold. And the question itself reveals everything the outsider does not understand. They are making a categorical mistake. They are looking at an economic ledger, at GDP, resource wealth, and corruption indices, and asking why these people don't revolt. What they should be looking at is the cognitive ledger. And once you see that ledger, the question changes entirely. The question is no longer, why aren't they revolting? The question becomes, how could they possibly revolt? To understand why this regime holds power without requiring tanks on every street corner, we need to follow one ordinary citizen through one complete day. Let's call him Joe. Joe is not politically naive. He is not lacking courage. He is not apathetic. He votes, he pays taxes, and he has a family he loves. Joe is simply depleted. Your brain is a finite energy system. It can only expend so much before it demands sleep. In a healthy society, a person expends energy on work, family, and basic maintenance. If they do this efficiently, they have a cognitive surplus left over at the end of the day. An extra reservoir of attention, decision-making capacity, and emotional energy. That surplus is where civic life lives. That surplus is where you read a policy proposal and feel anger, where you talk to your neighbor about shared problems, where you imagine a different arrangement of the world. The goal of the regime is not to crush Joe's will through fear. The goal is far more elegant. Ensure that Joe never accumulates a surplus. Let's watch his ledger drain. It starts at 6:45 in the morning with the first friction, electricity and water. Joe switches on a light. It flickers and dies. He waits, counting mentally until it flickers back on. He tries to wash his face, but the water pressure is a weak trickle. The power grid here is a public utility in name only. In reality, it's a patronage machine for regime allies. The blackouts are disguised as maintenance, presented as unavoidable consequences of supply shortages. But the shortages are manufactured. The uncertainty is intentional. Joe has learned to exist in a state of low-grade anxiety about whether he can shower, charge his phone, or refrigerate food. His brain is constantly making micro-calculations. This is a friction tax, not painful enough to trigger acute anger, just painful enough to occupy the space in his mind where questions about power and injustice might otherwise live. By 7:15, it's time for the commute. A 15-minute journey in a functioning city takes 75 minutes here. This is not bad planning. The infrastructure collapse is intentional. Roads are neglected because maintenance contracts are more profitable when granted to regime loyalists. Traffic lights are left broken. Police checkpoints are strategically placed, forcing minibus drivers to hand over a stack of bills just to pass. A person sitting in traffic cannot organize. A person navigating gridlock cannot coordinate with their neighbor. A person being humiliated by a police officer at a checkpoint cannot direct their anger towards systemic change. They can only feel small, guilty, and complicit. By the time Joe arrives at work at 8:30, he is visibly worn, and he hasn't even clocked in yet. Then comes the workplace precarity. Joe's job has no contract. His employment can be terminated without notice. He has no pension, no health insurance. His wage is paid inconsistently, sometimes on time, sometimes 2 weeks late with an explanation that makes no sense. If he complains, he is fired. If he tries to unionize, he is blacklisted. Anxiety about survival is a perfectly calibrated tax on his cognitive bandwidth. Every day, a part of Joe's brain is running a background process. Will the payment come? Can we cover rent? Can we feed the children? This background process consumes mental electricity continuously, making it impossible for him to think clearly about anything else for more than 5 minutes. At 1 o'clock, the inflation calculation hits. Inflation here is a lived daily experience. The price of bread changed yesterday. The price of fuel changed this morning. When Joe buys groceries, he is engaging in complex arithmetic. Can I afford chicken this week, or only lentils? Did the rent go up? What if my son gets sick? The regime tolerates this inflation because inflation keeps people desperate, disoriented, and focused entirely on survival. By 3:30, Joe faces the bureaucratic labyrinth just to renew his expiring ID card. The government office is a scene of strategic chaos. Long lines, handwritten signs reading "closed for prayers" hours after the fact, and clerks who point vaguely to other windows. After an hour of waiting, a clerk asks Joe for a document he was never told he needed. This is not incompetence. Incompetence would be fixable. This is strategic chaos. The system wins by forcing Joe to accept that dealing with the state is an ordeal designed to make him smaller. He leaves without his ID renewed, choosing to head back to work rather than lose a full day's wage. At 7:30 in the evening, Joe finally gets home. He slumps onto the couch. This is the dangerous moment. The moment the regime fears most. Joe still has a small fraction of cognitive credits remaining. If he sits in silence, if his mind clears for even 10 minutes, he might start thinking about his life. About the corruption that makes his job precarious. About the inflation that makes his wages meaningless. About the fact that a country as resource-rich as this one shouldn't be making him stand in traffic for 2 hours to renew a document. If Joe is left alone with his thoughts, he becomes dangerous. Not dangerous with a gun, dangerous with an idea. The regime knows this. They have prepared for this moment with the safety valves of the spectacle. The television turns on, and the screen floods with color and movement. It doesn't look like propaganda. It looks like entertainment. First, a state-backed historical melodrama set in a golden age. Every episode delivers a moment of peak emotional intensity, a confession, a betrayal, a narrow escape. Joe does not have to think, he just has to feel. His remaining cognitive credits are spent on anticipating whether the lovers will be reunited. Next, a talk show host conducts a theatrical trial over a manufactured moral panic, a viral video deemed immoral. Panelists are shouting, each righteously certain. Joe's phone bubbles. Social media is flooded with the exact same argument. Joe logs on, types a passionate, angry response, and hits send. He feels like he is participating in public discourse. He feels the rush of anger. But the coordination is zero. The system has turned his anger into fuel, but fuel that powers nothing except an algorithm. Finally, the late-night news offers him the Phantasmagoria. The anchor speaks with pride about a new mega-project, a futuristic city district being built in the desert at an enormous cost. Gleaming towers, monorails, technology of the future. The message is subtle. Progress is happening. Your poverty is just a temporary discomfort of transition toward greatness. Joe doesn't need to consciously believe it. It just needs to create a perpetual low-level haze of, maybe things are getting better. Maybe I'm just impatient. He never quite asks the dangerous question, who is this city actually for? By 9 o'clock, Joe's eyes close. The TV continues murmuring in the background. When Joe falls asleep, his cognitive ledger is at absolute zero. He did not have a single half hour of quiet, uninterrupted thought. He was fragmented across 9 different systematic drains, each embedded seamlessly into the normal functioning of society. Together, they form a perfect system. The regime doesn't need to throw everyone in prison or shoot people in the streets. That would be energetically expensive. That would create martyrs. That would make the regime visible. Instead, they remain invisible by hiding behind the noise of daily life. They don't control Joe by locking him in a cell. They control him by exhausting him on the way to work. They don't censor his speech. They flood his feed with things to scream about. The regime can push Joe as hard as they want. They can raise prices, slash subsidies, and erode his rights, as long as they never cross the critical threshold. That threshold isn't economic starvation. It is attentional starvation. The dangerous zone for a regime isn't when a population is poor. It's when the traffic clears up, the bureaucracy simplifies, the distractions fail, and an exhausted population suddenly finds themselves sitting in a quiet room with a surplus of currency, looking straight at the throne.